Mr. Ambassador, let's pick up right there. You would have preferred if they just had the meeting with the president of Ukraine without these conditions. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
But there were these conditions, and it involved an investigation, right?
Well, remember, the initial invitation that the president sent to President Zelensky had no conditions.
Well, but that didn't last very long, did it? And then there were conditions. This is not controversial at this point, I don't believe, sir. There were conditions that the president wanted investigations, right?
Right.
And you thought they were of Burisma and the 2016 election.
Correct.
We now know, of course, that Burisma means Biden's, right?
Today we do.
And we can probably, from today until the end of time, set aside any confusion that when somebody's asking for an investigation of Burisma over the summer, what they really meant was Biden's, right?
With 2020 hindsight, yes.
Right, with hindsight. And of course, on the day after the president's famous call, you're having lunch with David Holmes, we've covered this, and he overhears your conversation. And I know you said you have no reason to dispute what Mr. Holmes said. And I think you said you wouldn't have any reason to believe, to think you didn't speak about investigations with the president. The president raised investigations with you, right?
Correct.
On the 26th.
Correct.
And we now know, of course, that was about the Bidens and Burisma in 2016, right? I mean, I know you didn't know that at the time, that's your testimony, but we now know that,
I understood it
right?
meant to mean Burisma.
Mr. Holmes says you said Biden's right after that, but I know you don't recall that, right?
That's correct.
Do you dispute it?
I do.
Okay, but you don't recall it. But we know that that's what the president meant, right? And you do confirm that he wanted to talk about investigations with you.
Well, now with the complete picture, what he said 24 hours before, yes, it makes sense.
And you said it's wrong to investigate political opponents. We've agreed on that today, haven't we, sir?
Yes.
And yet, of course, that's what we know the president was asking for. Let me ask you something. Who would have benefited from an investigation of the president's political opponents?
I don't want to characterize who would have and who would not have.
I know you don't want to, sir. That's my question. Would you answer it for me?
Restate your question.
Who would benefit from an investigation of the president's political opponent?
Well, presumably the person who asked for the investigation.
Who's that?
If the president asked for the investigation, it would be he.
Well, it's not a hypothetical, is it, sir? We just went around this track, didn't we? The president asked you about investigations. He was talking about the Bidens. When he asked you about the Biden investigation, who was he seeking to benefit?
He did not ask me about the Biden investigation.
When he asked you about investigations,
19 times, Mr. Maloney.
Sir, we just went through this. When he asked you about investigations, which we all agree now means the Bidens, we just did this about 30 seconds ago. It's a pretty simple question, isn't it? I guess I'm having trouble why you can't just say...
When he asked about investigations, I assumed he meant...
I know what you assumed.
Company.
But who would benefit from an investigation of the Bidens?
They're two different questions.
I'm just asking you one. Who would benefit from an investigation of the Bidens?
I assume President Trump would benefit.
There we have it, see? Didn't hurt a bit, did it? Didn't hurt a bit. But let me ask you something.
Mr. Maloney?
Hold on, sir.
Excuse me. I've been very forthright, and I really resent what you're trying to do.
Fair enough. You've been very forthright. This is your third try to do so, sir. Didn't work so well the first time, did it? We had a little declaration come in after, you remember that? And now we're here a third time, and we got a doozy of a statement from you this morning. There's a whole bunch of stuff you don't recall. So all due respect, sir, we appreciate your candor, but let's be really clear on what it took to get it out of you. So my question is, when the president's putting pressure on the Ukrainians with holding a meeting to get this investigation that you and I agree would benefit him politically, what kind of position does that put the Ukrainians in, sir?
A terrible position.
Terrible position. Why?
Why does it put them in a terrible position?
Why?
Well, obviously, they're not receiving ultimately what they thought was coming to them, and they're put in a position that jeopardizes their security.
A position that jeopardizes their security, and they're being asked to do an investigation to help their security, essentially, that would benefit the president politically. In other words, you might say they're being asked to give him a personal benefit in exchange for an official act. Is that a fair summary?
In your hypothetical, that's correct.
It's not a hypothetical, sir. this is real life, were they asked to give him a personal benefit
By
in
whom?
exchange for an official act?
Sir, I am not going to go around in circles with you. Please be clear about what you're asking me.
My time's expired, sir. Thank you for your appearance.
Ms. Demings.